Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you so much for listening. Day 2 of the Great American, indeed, the world shutdown. I'm so proud of this great country. Really, it is just remarkable how people get it and pull together and put aside their differences. And we're always way ahead of mainstream media. We're always, I am a little bit vain about having warned everyone ineffectively throughout January that the coronavirus was coming, to the point of having Dwayne telling me I was losing audience because I was doing it. But I am very glad we have all gotten the message now. I wish I'd rather been right about Bernie and wrong about the coronavirus throughout the whole month of January, but I was wrong about Bernie and right about coronavirus, so perhaps now you'll listen. What you get, and I'm going to remind you every morning, is calm, focused, fact-based news for me. I'm pro-American and pro-world, and I have a bias towards silver linings and good news and a bias against division and distortion and especially sensationalism and politicization of the pandemic. And I believe in what Alex Haley said, find the good and praise it. So I'm starting this morning. This will surprise many of you. Many of you will be shocked. I'm starting this morning with a story about Cleveland, specifically Cleveland Cavaliers' Kevin Love. Now, he is a member of the 2016 championship team that completed the greatest comeback in the history of team sports ever. I think we've all agreed on that. When the Golden State Warriors collapsed and they were supposed to be killing the Cavaliers, and the Cavaliers were down 3-1 in 2016, and LeBron came out of nowhere to make the Batman block. And this makes Ben cry. He's sobbing quietly over at the screening table right now. But it's true. It's the greatest comeback in organized sport. Kevin Love was part of that team. He's part of Cleveland Cavs today. This is a story from Chris Federer in the Cleveland.com. One day after the sports world stopped and mine started to race, Kevin Love paused to think about how others would be impacted by the NBA suspension and the arena shutting down because of the rapid spread of the coronavirus. He vowed to donate $100,000 through the Kevin Love Fund in support of the Cleveland Cavaliers arena and support staff that had a, quote, sudden life shift. As part of his heartfelt Instagram post on Thursday, Kevin Love said he was hopeful that others would join in supporting communities. That's exactly what transpired. It's a positive moment during a dark time, Federer wrote. On Friday, after seeing Love's initial contribution, Milwaukee Bucks star Giannis and his family pledged $100,000 to the FizServe Forum. I don't know what they call it up in Milwaukee. Other members of the Bucks came forward to do the same. Then Detroit's Blake Griffin stepped up, vowed to help Little Caesars Arena workers while sharing a quick back and forth with Love on social media. Rookie Zion Williamson, who's quickly become one of the faces of the league, said he would cover salaries for all of the Pelicans arena staff over the next month, a way of thanking them for their support and hard work. Each player has had a different post, one with a specific message. Getting through this crisis will be a team effort and will be about coming together as a community to support others in any possible way. Beyond Love's generosity, nearly every NBA owner or organization has publicly or reportedly discussed an intention to compensate employees throughout the shutdown. Now, I retweeted that on Twitter, and Baseball is Almost Back is a Twitter account that's legit. Older person. As a seasonal Mariners employee, he wrote, or she wrote, I stand to lose about $10K of extra income. While my main job makes this just a small problem, I know plenty who this potential lost income will actually hurt if the season never starts. Really curious how Major League Baseball will handle this. And last word, William writes, he just writes about sports and politics. I call balls and strikes. Don't like it, don't follow. And he's a legit, he's not a troll. And you and I, Dwayne, we know about 1,000 billion people who work that. We know what those jobs are, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're the usually white-haired guy, shows you to your seat. If someone gets a little bit rowdy, they call security.
Ushers, concession workers, the guys that throw the peanuts at you, the guys that call out churros and throw churros at you. Yeah, there's lots of people that depend on that as like a second job.
And on the way into the stadium, you'll find all the vendors with the big red hands, number one, and you'll find all the Cavaliers gear, and of course the Indians this year going to the World Series and all. That's coming up. They will have all sorts of memorabilia to sell. And, of course, the Browns, who signed yesterday Jack Conklin and a great tight end and a backup, Casey Keenum, has come to Cleveland. We had a great day for the Browns yesterday. All their seasonal employees need help. And if their players do what Kevin Love did, and then, much more importantly, if employers around the country follow that lead. Now, Adam is a married man. His wife works in retail. Not going to tell you where, not going to tell you for whom. They're taking 2 weeks off with the great 15-day shutdown, slowdown, and will be compensated. I had many conversations yesterday with my number two at the Nixon Library in Yorba Linda, and everyone's going to work from home. Everyone's going to get paid. We're going to repurpose some employees, teach them how to do phone stuff, phone booking, that kind of stuff. Brides want to have a tour of the East Room. They're going to do a virtual tour of the East Room because that's really one of the most popular wedding venues in all of California. That exact replica of the East Room in the White House. Why wouldn't it be? But we're not going to do those tours. We're going to do everything virtual and until April 1. 15 days is April 1. So the whole country has to basically stand behind their employees, and the Congress will also pass. Some companies cannot do that. Small businesses especially that are living on thin margin and just open cannot do that. But you can also go out of your way. In the next segment, I'm going to read you the guidance from the president, but I want you to hear what the president said yesterday at the White House press. He was great, by the way. He was terrific yesterday. Cut number 2.
This morning I spoke with the leaders of the G7 nations, and they really had a good meeting. I think it was a very, very productive meeting. I also spoke with our nation's governors, and this afternoon we're announcing new guidelines for every American to follow over the next 15 days as we combat the virus. Each and every one of us has a critical role to play in stopping the spread and transmission of the virus. We did this today. This was done by a lot of very talented people, some of whom are standing with me, and that's available. And Dr. Birx will be speaking about that in just a few minutes. It's important for the young and healthy people to understand that while they may experience milder symptoms, they can easily spread this virus, and they will spread it indeed, putting countless others in harm's way. We especially worry about our senior citizens. The White House Task Force meets every day and continually updates guidelines based on the fast-evolving situation that this has become all over the world. It's all over the world. It's incredible what's happened in such a short period of time. On the guidelines of the task force, the new modeling conducted by Dr. Birx, and our consultation with governors, we've made the decision to further toughen the guidelines and blunt the infection now. We'd much rather be ahead of the curve than behind it, and that's what we are. Therefore, my administration is recommending that all Americans, including the young and healthy, work to engage in schooling from home when possible, avoid gathering in groups of more than 10 people, avoid discretionary travel, and avoid eating and drinking at bars, restaurants, and public food courts. If everyone makes this change or these critical changes and sacrifices now, we will rally together as one nation, and we will defeat the virus, and we're going to have a big celebration all together. With several weeks of focused action, we can turn the corner and turn it quickly. A lot of progress has been made. I'm also pleased to report today that a vaccine candidate has begun the phase 1 clinical trial. This is one of the fastest vaccine development launches in history. Not even close. We're also racing to develop antiviral therapies and other treatments, and we've had some promising results, early results, but promising, to reduce the severity and the duration of the symptoms. And I have to say that our government is prepared to do whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, we're doing. We're doing it in every way. And with that, I'd like to just introduce Dr. Birx, who's going to...
Did you hear that? That's what everyone is doing. From Kevin Love to the president, approach this time as though it were your finest hour. And we did that in 9/11. We did that in 2008. I know the market went down 3,000 points. It may go down again today. It'll go up eventually. After the pandemic is contained, there will be an enormous and rapid rebound. Tell everyone to be calm, eat pizza, have fun, stay home, and listen to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Keep it playing, America. It's St. Patrick's Day. And that doesn't mean that we can't have fun today at home by ourselves. We need the Irish Rovers. Would you like me to sing?
I'm pretty sure that will increase the steepening decline of the market if you sing.
Her eyes, they shone like a diamond. You'd swear she was queen of the land. And her hair held over her shoulder, tied up with a black velvet band.
So much for the future.
Doherty and the Something Sisters used to sing at Jonathan Swift's in Cambridge. All right, you can take it down. And in those days, I may have had a beer or two, and that was the best place in Harvard Square. Jonathan Swift's. With a sign on the stairs going down that enjoined people again, better to be silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and confirm it for everybody. That was one of those, it's just a great dive bar. And Shaughnessy and what were their names? Something Sisters. Somebody will tell me. Let me check the pre-market report on this St. Patrick's Day, America. Yesterday, of course, was a slaughterhouse on the market. But understand, that doesn't matter if you didn't sell. You didn't lose anything. And don't feel poor. It is the absolutely predictable response of markets. This is brought to you, by the way, by Birch Gold. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about gold right now. They are a great sponsor. You can call 800-434-GOLD, 800-434-GOLD to do one of two things. Buy physical gold and put it in your safety deposit box. Never keep it at home. 800-434-GOLD, but they don't want to sell you if you're going to call for less than $5,000. They'll sell you for $5,000 or more, and I believe that is a good allocation to have minimum in your safety deposit box. Or you can go to hughgold.com where they'll help you roll over a portion of your IRA or your 401k. Not all of it. You should diversify your portfolio into bonds, stocks, and precious metals. That's the Hugh Hewitt way. If you have a bond diversification, you've gone up over the last month as your stocks have gone down. If you've had gold, you went up, then you went down. Gold yesterday closed down. I mean, right now it's at $1,474. Why is that? Because the market is completely a kidder. It doesn't know what signal to believe. Markets are kind of off right now. But you know what? Gold won't go down that far. It's a great entry point. A great entry point today. Now, I bought gold higher than it is today, but I'm not selling it because that's not what gold is for. Gold is for long-term runaway asset. It will not decline in value more than 5 or 10% over the course of 5 or 10 years. And it will go up potentially a lot. You can only sell it. That's what I've usually done. Bought gold. It's gone up. I've given it away to charities and church at its appreciated value so I didn't have to pay tax on it. And that's what people often do. That's why Birch Gold, they lead the way. You can trust them. 800-434-GOLD, 1-800-434-GOLD. It's a toll-free call. Or call or go to hughgold.com, hughgold.com. Now, yesterday the NASDAQ went down. Let's look at square in the eye. 2,997 points. That was 12.93%. Probably the single biggest decline in one day. NASDAQ was down almost 1,000. And then right after the market closed, right after it closed, Amazon announced they're going to hire 100,000 people because they are so busy. So what's going on in the economy? A giant disintermediation brought about by the Great American Shutdown. And we won't know Amazon, I own Amazon, so I'm very happy about this. I'm sure they're up in the pre-market. I haven't looked. And who knows what's going to happen throughout the day. The market, they could be down again today, but I'm not selling a share. And unless you own movie theater stock, I wouldn't sell a share. I wouldn't sell the airline. The airlines are going to get bailed out, and that's good. President said that. We're going to stand strongly behind him. I think I've got a piece coming out in the Post this morning on what the Senate ought to do, and I'll tell you more about that after the break. Hose the country down with water and money. Jake Sherman of Politico joins me afterwards. But remember, Birch Gold, if you've got the ability to buy $5,000 or more worth of gold, you should do it. This is such an opportunity. 800-434-GOLD, 800-434-GOLD. That's a Toll-free call. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt on St. Patrick's Day during the Great American Shutdown, joined by Jake Sherman of Politico. Happy St. Patrick's Day, Jake. How are you?
Thank you, Hugh. I'm wonderful. How you doing?
Great. Now, we're speculating at the studio that all you young millennials, like Mr. Sherman and everyone at Politico, that there are going to be a lot of coronial babies showing up in 9 months. Have you discussed that among your millennial friends? Is that actually going to happen?
I've heard that theory of the case. I couldn't speak to that. It seems to make sense, although maybe people are afraid of sharing germs. So I don't know the answer to that.
Not in your. If you saw the Clearwater video yesterday of all of those college break kids in the water, they're clearly not getting the message. Jake Sherman, did you see that?
No, they're not. I did see that. I think they're idiots.
Someone needs to go up to them. You know, if I was down there and I saw my actually, I don't have a grandchild that age. My oldest grandchild's 8. But if I saw my son or daughter doing something that dumb, I'd cut them off. I'd say, get out of there. I'm not paying for college if you're going to go infect the world. Jake, what I wanted to ask you is, the House passed a bill finally last night. The Senate ain't going to pass that bill. How long do we expect the Senate to take to amend the House bill?
I don't know that you're right about that. I know Tom Cotton doesn't like it, but here's the new dynamic that's going to take place. Stephen Mnuchin's going to go to the Capitol today, and he's going to ask for $850 billion in the stimulus package, and he's going to make the case, and I think he's going to be backed up by the Senate leadership, that they should focus their energy on this next package and let the other package go through and not focus too much on it. And I think, to be honest with you, that's a possibility. And listen, even if there are a couple of Republicans against, I don't know how many there are at this point, but even if there are a few, there's going to be a lot of every Senate Democrat's going to be for this bill, and it'll take longer, but I imagine the Senate can get it through. I don't know that for a fact, but I think that the idea that there's another bill coming down the pike might be attractive to some people.
Now, Jake, if the Senate has a handshake deal, if Mitch McConnell has a handshake deal, or a virtual handshake deal, a social distancing handshake deal with Nancy Pelosi, we'll pass your bill and you pass ours. I could see that happening because I know that Senator Cotton and others want much more direct aid than the House bill provides. They want
and they're going to get it in. They're going to get it in this next bill, which is, again, as we reported on Playbook this morning, going to be worth $850 billion at least, and a huge chunk of that's going to be the payroll tax cut, which, in my estimation, faces uncertain prospects on Capitol Hill. But all that being said, I do think that McConnell is going to, I don't know if there's a handshake deal, but I do think McConnell is going to take a much more forceful role in this phase 3, as we're calling it, bill than he did in phase 2.
No, I've been following Jake Sherman tweets closely. I noted you said yesterday John Thune was collecting ideas, so I immediately sent a note to him, and I immediately wrote an op-ed for the Post because I have my theories on what genuine relief and genuine stimulus look like. How long, I want to make sure I publish it in time for them to read it, how long will it take to get the Phase 3 bill done?
Well, Marco Rubio said to my colleague John Bresnan, who was in the Capitol yesterday, that he wants to do it this week, and that seems to be an idea gaining steam, to be honest with you, because I think, and Rubio said this on the record, a lot of other people have said it too, if they leave this week, they don't know when they're going to be able to come back. And they also don't want to be sticking around the Capitol as this thing continues to spread. We saw Ben Ray Lujan, the number 4 House Democrat, say he's going to self-quarantine. I think there's a real risk here with a lot of people around the Capitol and people's aides and police officers and all those kinds of people at the Capitol. It's setting a bad example. And I think people understand that the nation's legislature has to do its work here, but at the same time, there's just a concern about public health and public safety. So I think they've really lit a fire here, and I think they're going to try to get it done this week or get a package done this week, and then that could be ready for early to mid next week, theoretically, for the House to take it up.
Now, the House is not recessing, correct? They are waiting to see what Phase 3 is.
They are in recess. They're in recess this week. But I just, listen, it becomes more and more dangerous for a body where the average age is in the 50s or 60s to just keep going back and forth on airplanes. And a lot of people, especially in the House, don't have homes in Washington, so they're going back and forth to their districts, and it's quite dangerous. So I think there's a sensitivity to that, and I don't know where you fall on this, Hugh, but if there ever was a case for some sort of mobile voting mechanism for Congress, this would be it. And
I'm against it. I'm against it. But I'm not against the minimum number of people and making them the younger members come back with a handshake agreement that they all will vote yes. And I love Chuck Grassley. I love the guy. He's one of my favorite guests. I'd get him out of there, right? Even though he's probably the smartest guy on the finance committee, I'd say I wouldn't let Ruth Bader Ginsburg go to the Supreme Court. These people are crazy. No. And so I think the Chief Justice, who's my age, did the smart thing and said, we're not doing the oral argument stuff because Ruth will, I'm interpreting here. Ruth and Stephen Breyer and my colleagues older than me, Justice Thomas, they should not come to court. They should stay home. I'm glad that they are. But my question is, does the House agree, in your opinion, that they get what they pass and the Senate gets what the Senate passes because no relief stimulus is going to be too much?
Well, I think it's just a little bit more complicated than that. The first tranche was definitely driven by Pelosi, but it was also driven by Mnuchin, and Kevin McCarthy had a big say on it, and 150 Republicans voted for it. So 150 out of 197 or 157 out of 197 voted for it. So it's not as if they did not have any say in this and they were not complicit or in agreement on this deal. So I do think that the House, that there is just broad agreement that a massive package is in the pike, and one of the main elements of this is going to be airline relief. And this morning in Playbook, we have a letter from the United CEO where he says this incident, this crisis, is much worse than 9/11 for airlines, which is
and Jake, let me interrupt. But what I object to with the airlines, we all know that. I flew from California to D.C. on a 1/3 full direct flight from L.A. on Sunday. I know that. But I just read Kevin Love's story about the seasonal employees of Major League Sports. I know, because I run the Nixon Library, we're shuttered. Every attendance-driven venue in America is shuttered. My cabbie from National had one lift that day, me. And so the need for put-up-your-hand relief is so sweeping that the House bill is simply not enough.
But they didn't intend it to be enough. They didn't intend it to be enough. The question to me is, where do they go from here? I mean, do they do what Romney said and send out $1,000 checks to everybody? I don't know the answer to that, and I think Mnuchin is trying to figure out what that sweet spot is with the assistance of the Senate Republican leadership.
And that's what I'm getting to. What John Thune was doing yesterday. I happen to think that Mitt Romney and Senator Scott in a room presents more collective business experience than the rest of the Senate combined, and that they ought to listen to those two guys. But there are other people who know, and I think Leader McConnell will work with Mnuchin and experts to put together a comprehensive sweeping bill. And if it's $850 billion or if it's $1 trillion or if it's $2 trillion, I don't care, because I think it's just liquidity. It's actually a bigger problem than 9/11, but it's far more pervasive. I mean, it's national. It's coast to coast. What's Politico doing? Have you cut back on hours? Are there people at your office that are not coming in?
Our newsroom, I believe, and I haven't been there, from what I understand, is practically empty. We're mostly working from home. I think we have the skeleton crew at the Capitol. And the Capitol, if you ask my wife, is very dangerous and very susceptible to disease spread. And people are very concerned about standing around a bunch of reporters and a bunch of members of Congress for the foreseeable future. I mean, I kind of wonder if the Senate gets this through and the House passes it shortly thereafter. I mean, we could see Congress gone until June or July. I really believe so. That.
Unless they find out. That's why they can't go big enough. Honestly, we had a $22 trillion debt. It's a big debt. If it goes to 24, it's still a big debt. It's a 10% increase in debt. But it's the kind of thing that makes markets move and reassures people. And mostly people need to be reassured that for a month, their employers can pay them. That's really the essence, isn't it? And that businesses will make up lost profits.
I mean, listen, I kind of wonder, after the Fed did what it did and the market continues to nosedive, I wonder if there is anything that will make markets move in a positive direction. I don't understand. I think the fact that Trump said yesterday, July or August is the kind of the long end of this crisis, spooked markets, and I just don't know what's going to be next for markets. I don't know how markets.
Well, I don't know. Markets were down. Markets were down 11% when the president started talking. They were down 12%. They were in free fall. You know what happened after the market closed? Amazon announced it was hiring 100,000 people at higher wages. That's because of the disintermediation of retail and the movement to Amazon. I think you're going to begin to see sector rebounds based upon projected transitions in the economy based upon new social patterns. Jake, last word to you.
I think that's right. I mean, the larger question to me just happens to be, I mean, look, the futures are down already this morning. European markets, which were up 2 or 3%, are now down again. So I'm very worried about that. I'm very skeptical that I just don't know what's going to make these markets pop.
Jake, I just like to make sure everyone's futures are up. The S&P's up 26%.
Oh, they're up now? Okay, they were.
The NASDAQ's
they were
up 1%. Dow's up almost 1%. I just like people to know always.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Talk unless I have it in front of me. But
that's it, because they changed. Yeah, they changed so rapidly. And I tell everyone, I have no market predictions because I remember 2008 so vividly and the big swings. And then it settles down after 30 days. And we will settle down. We'll adapt. But the Congress, the last question actually, do they know they have to go big, go fast, go far?
Yes, it seems like they do. The question is what the details look like, but it seems like everybody's on the same page here that they just need to lock arms and kind of jump because things are not looking good.
That is terrific. I actually think things are far better than people think, but I have a bias towards silver linings. Jake Sherman of Politico, keep tweeting. I find it invaluable. I'm following it on a day and when I send you the magic recipe, Jake, I hope you'll tweet it out. Don't go anywhere, America. Jake Sherman, except at Politico.com. Get the playbook. And, of course, follow Jake on Twitter. Follow me to ReliefFactor.com. Once again, took it this morning. I'm at the remote studio while we continue to fix our main studio. Dwayne broke it when I was away in Hawaii. And as a result, I've been using Seb Gorka's studio. Thank you, Seb. Wiping it down, making sure that it's clear. It's a ReliefFactor.com studio as well. And I am continuing to exercise. As one of the things I'm going to ask Dr. Fauci, if he comes in next hour like he's expected to do, or talks to me next hour, I want him to emphasize what I believe to be the case. People over the age of 60, though they are at particular risk of the virus, need to keep up healthy practices, including daily exercise. And you may hate that because it hurts. That's where Relief Factor comes in. Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. 1995. This is the time to really increase your daily routine. Not overnight. Don't go run 7 miles. Don't go, lift 100 pounds. But do something more than you did last week and continue to. You got time. You're allowed to go out. It's okay to walk in the rain. That's not going to kill you. Not going to give you the virus. The virus can only be spread by droplets of people who have it. It remains on surfaces. So just go and exercise outside. It's the best thing in the world. Not with a crowd. Our friend Michael Beckman's walking around the mall. I know they clean the mall overnight. That's very good. In Houston, they have malls, which is remarkable. I didn't know Houston had malls. That's great. And think about how the Browns are going to have a great Super Bowl next year. Having signed new tight end, new right tackle, new backup quarterback. There's lots to exercise and think about as you take your ReliefFactor.com and get going. Go to ReliefFactor.com, 1995, get you started, and come right back. David Drucker joins me. We get another sense of where the House and Senate are after the break. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Don't forget to sign up for the Hugh. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.universe.com.
Welcome back, America. One of my favorite bookstores, Politics and Prose, is now shipping direct and free shipping through March 31st. Support your local bookstore. David Drucker, you're a Politics and Prose fan, aren't you?
Sure, why not? And since I can't go anywhere, that's good to hear.
Yeah. Now, David, I just talked to Jake Sherman, and I'm really trying to drill down. It's
Okay.
Jake's opinion that the House bill will pass the Senate today, and that the Senate will draft a bill and send it to the House with the expectation that the House will pass their bill under the theory that no amount of stimulus is too much. Do you agree?
Well, I would tend to agree that that seems to be where we are, in part because it seems like both parties share the same opinion about the crisis. The White House and Congress seems to share the same opinion about the crisis, and I've seen members of Congress from both sides of the aisle seem to share the same view of the crisis and are pitching in many ways the same solutions about trying to keep industries afloat while the economy essentially grinds to a halt.
And so,
the usual philosophical bickering.
what part of I understand what the House bill does. It's a little bit complicated, but and I know Senator Cotton will be on later today. He doesn't like it, but I think it'll pass. But what does the Senate want to do specifically? I've got my ideas. They'll be in a Washington Post column later today, but what do you hear Mnuchin and McConnell want?
Well, that's still unclear to me, and I've been focused more on the politics of this and how the American people are processing this. But, I think that the Senate has some concerns about how this is going to impact industry and businesses. But that's why, and I think this is important, I think it's important for people to understand that the arguments are because the goals are shared, where often you find the different sides on the Hill have different goals in mind. Everybody has in mind this idea that Americans that are impacted by this economically, and that industries, businesses that are impacted by this economically, can have a bridge to get us from where they were 2 weeks ago to whenever it is this, we get relatively, what we would think of as back to normal. And that's what they're trying to resolve.
Yeah, and I don't think it's particularly partisan. I think that they just have different worldviews about what works. And so the best answer in a crisis is to do it all of the above. And I think, I don't believe, this is really the essence of it, I do not believe that either party dare turn down any offer of stimulus.
Yeah, I would be surprised if we saw that happen in any large measure. And look, we've seen Republicans proposing stimuli. We've seen them proposing cash payments to American adults. I mean, I don't think this is falling along the usual lines in terms of how these arguments usually break down. I think there is some concern in the Senate about unintended consequences of the House bill. And so you may see them try and make some corrections, so to speak, which would be legislation that the House would also have to pass. But I think it also depends on what they hear from the president and how much he just wants them to get this thing to his desk and then draft another bill if that's what you want to do. But we already know from the speaker that there other bills are in the works. We know that Senate Republicans are going to want to put their stamp on this, and so I expect them to be busy doing that because of how catastrophic this could be. And at the very least, it's a catastrophic blow temporarily, I think, to the American psyche. When you cannot go to a restaurant and when so much of the economy grinds to a halt because people are not allowed to consume the way they normally would consume, and it can breed a lot of insecurity.
I feel it everywhere. I run the Nixon Library. We had to send everyone home. I gave my EVP make sure everyone understands this is a 2-week deal, maybe a 4-week deal, but we'll be fine. I mean, people will go back to the library eventually. And that Kevin Love making the donation, whatever Giannopoulos is at the Bucks, making his donation, all the players trying to take care of seasonal staff. I think America actually is doing pretty good in terms of trying to smooth this out. On the other hand, direct relief is what is needed, right?
Yeah, I think that if the federal government, I think if we want to try and ensure that this is not as disruptive as it could be, because it's not a normal slowdown. I mean, the economy wasn't petering out. The people, economic actors, you, me, businesses, have been forced to stop doing things for fear of spreading this virus. And so if we want to somehow make it so that when the curve flattens, when the infection curve flattens and we can start gathering again, businesses are still operational and people still have jobs, there needs to be money so that these mortgages can be paid, rents can be paid, overhead can be paid, things like that.
Yeah, it's like a car that has been parked for 3 months. If it's got gas in it and the battery has its charge, it will start. So the economy of America, whether it's parked for 2 weeks or 2 months, will start when, the green flag waves. That's what I think is the assumption. But the House wants to put gas in and the Senate wants to put oil in, and they both should be allowed to do what they want to do, in my opinion. David M. Drucker at the Washington Examiner. Thank you, David. Byron York joins me, his colleague. Dr. Fauci coming up, Senator Tom Cotton, Michael Shear from the New York Times, David French from the Dispatch, Alfredo Ortiz from Job Creators Network. Hey, calm, fact-based, focused, biased towards silver lining and upbeat. That's the way America is. That's the way the Hugh Hewitt Show is. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt across 400 affiliates and 6 million people. I know you're listening for facts. I know you're listening for silver lining bias, and I've got that with Byron York of the Washington Examiner. He's on top of everything in D.C. Byron, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. Well, I asked Dwayne how he was doing, and he said, well, asymptomatic, and I'm the same.
Well, he's happy because I'm in D.C. self-isolating. He doesn't have to deal with me every morning. He's in California. Byron, let me ask you, first of all, any personal stories? Anyone in your family sick?
No, we're very fortunate on that score right now.
You and me both. I have yet to find anyone who's been personally touched by the virus, but we will. Eventually, we will all know somebody, and I hope everyone's story has a happy ending. I think we're still ahead of the curve here. What do you've got a very good perspective. Do you think, Dr. Fauci always says, as soon as you think you're ahead of the curve, you're really behind it. I know that. Where do you think we are on the curve of response?
Well, it's hard to know because there is this lag. And you think, well, did I do something irresponsible 8 days ago, and will that show up? So there is this lag we don't know. It seems to me that large parts of America are taking this quite seriously. And as far as the Trump administration is concerned, I still think he did the single best thing that could have been done in this whole thing, which was when he stopped restricted travel from China on January 31, and also the single worst thing, which is not taking the testing issue seriously enough and getting ahead and using his presidential powers to push people to do things. And that really is the president's powers, to just push the bureaucracy to get things done.
I think you've correctly identified that. I want to add, there's a lot of misinformation about the closing of the National Security Council's, pandemic section. And Robert O'Brien's a very dear friend of mine. I follow this. They didn't close anything. They consolidated, and one of the veterans of the office said, we didn't do that. But the media keeps repeating it, Byron. It's one of the reasons why this is not the media's finest hour, because a lot of them cannot disengage from their TDS.
On this National Security Council thing, you're absolutely right. There's two issues with it. One is whether Trump actually did it. And as I'm sure you've talked about many times, the National Security Council had just grown and grown and grown and like quadrupled in size over the years. It was bloated. It was too big. And so there was a reason that John Bolton, then the National Security Advisor, wanted to bring it down in size because it was getting beyond what it's supposed to do, simply, which is to coordinate between the various agencies of the government. So this was one of the offices that they put into that they took away its standalone office and put its functions into another office. And so we just had a piece yesterday by Tim Morrison, who was at the National Security Council. People may remember him testifying in the whole Ukraine investigation because he was actually on the Trump-Zelensky call and did not hear anything that he thought was wrong, unlike Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. But anyway, he wrote a piece and say, look, Trump and Bolton reorganized the NSC because it was too darn big. And the function of this office was placed in another office. It doesn't mean it was dissolved. That's one thing. But then the other thing is the idea that a few more staffers or a standalone office with letterhead in the National Security Council would have somehow affected the global spread of this disease is, let's just say, not really serious.
Byron, I watched Steve Holland yesterday, who's a pros pro from Reuters, and his questions were all designed to elicit information that would help the public. Many people's questions are designed to hurt the president. And that's actually where my greatest grievance with the media is. Just stow that away. I'll come back to it. But I want to ask you a question that was posed to me by a former senior state legislator and member of congressional staff. I'll just call him Senator Gregg. If we ever get an honest look at why the CDC wouldn't take the WHO COVID-19 test, we will find regulatory capture. Some pharma-type company had convinced them to use their test instead and then couldn't deliver. Do you believe? I don't know what happened in the test. You're right. That's the president's wheelhouse. He needs to push that through. Maybe he did as fast as any president could have. given what CDC told him. But do you know the facts of that, Byron?
I don't. And you've really you pointed your finger at something that's extremely important in this. From what I have read about it, it has all the marks of bureaucratic inaction, of bureaucratic sclerosis. And if it came because of regulatory capture, that is the regulators being too close to the industries they regulate, then it would be entirely characteristic of what happens in Washington too much. That's actually what I did mean earlier when I say the president's power is to push people to do things and to reach down and just kick some asses in the bureaucracy at wherever they need to be kicked. And that's what didn't happen for a while in some of the critical early stages of this.
Now, I speak Trump. I jokingly say I speak Trump. And I heard him yesterday. I've listened to him. And I think what he was saying, and I base this on the two great popular histories, the Ghost Map, which is about the 1854 cholera epidemic in London, and the Great Influenza about the 1918 and 1920 pandemic. I heard the president say the structure we had to break down wasn't built for this. What I heard him actually trying to say is, if he was Hugh Hewitt and a talk show host, friends, everything we've done before, Ebola, H1N1, nothing like this. This is unique in that no one gave us warning, and it is more infectious and not as easily identifiable as Ebola or H1N1. And therefore, I get a 10 out of 10 because I'm doing as well as anyone could have ever done given these unique circumstances. Fair translation, Byron?
That is, I think, the best possible way to say what the president was saying, and I do think a lot of times when he says something like, "Well, it could last till July or August," he was not talking about the restrictions he was putting out. He was talking about the presence of the disease in our society. On the other hand, sometimes it's hard to figure out his intention. I remember, there was a time. And it was with you, the candidate Trump called President Obama the founder of ISIS.
Yes.
And you said something to the effect, well, Mr. Trump, of course what you mean is that by withdrawing so rapidly from Iraq, President Obama created conditions that led to the growth of ISIS. And Trump said, no, I mean he's the founder of ISIS.
Yes, he doubled down. It became a viral moment. But that's why I speak Trump.
Yeah.
And if you don't speak Trump, or you do speak Trump and you refuse to translate, I think you're doing a disservice to America at this point.
What he was doing was he had a point he wanted to make in that whole ISIS stuff.
Yes.
And he was not going to let you nuance it for him.
Exactly. You speak Trump. You speak Trump. But I think everybody speaks Trump in D.C. They just refuse to translate.
I agree. Listen, I think, and this is completely apart from the coronavirus stuff, I think we have seen years of many people in the media willfully misunderstanding what the president says and putting the worst possible gloss on what he says when it is entirely possible to put a far more benign gloss on whatever.
And let me be a little bit more sinister. I saw a credentialed media person from a big, I'm not going to shame them, maybe they regret it. They took half a quote from the governor's transcript where the president was urging them to buy direct if they could because point of purchase might be quicker. And they edited it to make it sound like he was indifferent to their need. It was purposefully misrepresenting the president during a crisis. It's actually ethically shocking.
It was they were making it out to be like a Trump you're on your own moment. And we saw that when Trump was complaining earlier on about Democrats using the coronavirus as another political weapon against him, which he tied to the impeachment as the last political weapon that they used against him. And there was a lot of reporting that the president said coronavirus itself was a hoax. Finally, actually got several Pinocchios in the Washington Post fact checking. Actually,
but you know what Mark Twain said: a lie is halfway around the world before it's faster than the virus. A lie before truth gets its boots on. In the end, I very quickly, Byron, Do you think everything to this point is sort of irrelevant, that yesterday was a different moment and a different chapter begun?
Oh, absolutely. It could be that we are on the line, on the path to flattening this curve, which is what everybody's wanting to do.
Byron York, keep coming back. Follow him on Twitter, America, at Byron York. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Anthony Fauci coming up, bottom of the hour.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt on St. Patrick's Day, the Irish Rover. One of my favorite, the wreck of the Irish Rover. But we haven't got time for that today. Let me explain something to you folks. Andrew and Todd and Sierra Pacific Mortgage, my sponsors, andrewandtodd.com, they are alive and well. Some major banks have suspended completely taking refinance applications. andrewandtodd.com and everyone else at Sierra Pacific Mortgage are adding refinances to their numbers. Some major banks are pushing back at the funding of their purchase loans. They don't want to do it. Not andrewandtodd.com. Sierra Pacific and Andrew and Todd, they are no pushback mortgage lenders. They will lend you the money. While the Fed's actions have dramatically reduced short-term interest rates, andrewandtodd.com, Sierra Pacific Mortgage have translated that Fed cut to low 10, 15, and 20-year fixed rates. They are there to be a light in the mortgage world during these unprecedented times. So please, 888-1172, if you're going to buy property, if you're going to refinance during this period of time, trust my friends, andrewandtodd.com. That is the prelude to the market report. I don't think any of you don't know, but I've been, I always do yesterday's market in the morning. It was one of the worst days in the history of the market. Went down almost 13% yesterday, almost 3,000 points. The Dow did the same, almost 1,000 points. You know what? I think today's going to be an up day. Pretty sure of it. Why? I look at futures. I look at Amazon yesterday, right after the market closed, said, you know what, folks, we got to hire 100,000 people. Now, I happen to own Amazon stock, and, that's good for me. That tells me Amazon's going to have a great quarter, and there will be other people that have great quarters, but generally the country is going to have a short, sharp recession. It is. It just is. Brian Westbury yesterday said 10% drop, maybe double digit. And then a massive rebound once we break the curve. So don't sell anything, please. I don't give financial advice, but call your financial advisor. Richard Botkin is mine. I talked to him. Don't sell anything. I told my kid, don't sell a thing. This is a market panic because the market doesn't know what the signal is. Noise and signal ratio is out of control. And so in periods of time like that, don't try and be smarter than everyone else. Don't stop exercising. So that's andrewandtodd.com. Don't stop exercising. I'm telling you about relieffactor.com right now because I got Dr. Fauci coming up, I think, after the break, and I want as much time with him as possible. So I'm going to ask him, should seniors keep exercising? I think he's going to say, absolutely. Just do it alone. Or do it with your spouse if you are co-hibernating together, and you can go for walks, you can go for runs, you can go to your weight room in your house, you can go lift and do isometrics and push-ups and sit-ups and limber up and Pilates by yourself. I think that's what he's going to say. But if you're going to start getting into shape right now, you're going to need Relief Factor more than ever. And if you are used to doing A and you have to do B because the gym is closed, you're going to use new muscle groups and you're going to be sore. And Relief Factor is for the support the temporary relief of minor aches and pains, like carrying curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. ReliefFactor.com. Go to that, please. ReliefFactor.com. Now, as the coronavirus outbreaks continues to impact our nation, cities from New York to Chicago to Alameda completely closed. But in Guatemala, the day is going on as it always has been in the highlands of Guatemala. There is no food. There is no shopping. We're getting a little touch of that right now. They buy beans with little nutritional value. Their children have the highest level of malnutrition in the Western Hemisphere. Just listen.
Here, infant malnutrition exceeds the levels found in Haiti. Is it an exaggeration to say they are starving? Not at all. They are starving. They're part of us. They are Guatemalans. They are children. Who is going to help them? Who's going to tell them they can play in peace? Who is going to promise them a future if they can't even have the most basic thing, food?
So while you are social distancing, do some praying and consider a contribution. It's really an act of generosity when our country is on fire to reach out to another country. Feed Starving Families banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. Or call 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. But at HughHewitt.com, you get all the interviews I'm going to do with Anthony Fauci and everyone else. But there you also get the Feed Starving Families banner at the top. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening. The Greeks had the Oracle of Delphi, and Americans have the Oracle of Fauci. And Dr. Anthony Fauci joins me now. Good morning, Doctor. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I am terrific. Thank you for all you're doing for the country. My wife, who we refer to as the fetching Mrs. Hewitt here, wanted me to say you're a rock star, and everybody knows it.
Why, thank you.
I want to thank, by the way, your wife, Christine, your daughters, Jennifer, Megan, and Allison. They must be worried about you like my daughter's worried about me. Is that true?
That is correct. They really are. I was hoping that wouldn't be the case, but they really are.
Well, you're working hard. I mean, you're making a mockery of all of us who think we work hard in the 60s, but you're in your 70s. I have a question, though. My daughter, who I refer to as Rumpel, she who must be obeyed, is now telling me what I can and cannot do. Is that what you intended to do, to empower children to tell their parents what to do and not to do?
Well, whatever it takes, really, to get things done in an appropriate manner. Very often, children, and my own children, I can say for sure, have a significant influence on your behavior. When they come in, they give you a new kind of reality test. So when they tell you to stay home or distance yourself from people and don't go to crowded places, you listen to them. If you sort of see it on TV or read about it or hear about it on the radio, it kind of goes by you without really hitting you. But when your children tell you, that's a different story.
Now, I want to drill down on seniors, my target audience. We got 6 million people who listen to this show. The vast majority of them are between 45 and 64, but we got a lot of older people as well. A lot of grandparents, including me. All of my grandkids are under 9. This weekend, I was going to go drive and see them because my daughter's alone. My son-in-law is deployed, and there are 3 kids under 9. And she said to me yesterday, don't come. Is she right?
She is. Right now, what we're trying to do, and yesterday at the White House Task Force press conference, we made an announcement to really ratchet up some of the guidelines for what we call physical and social distancing. And one of them is if you have someone who is elderly, and particularly an elderly person with an underlying condition such as heart disease and lung disease or diabetes that puts them at an increased risk of getting the complications of coronavirus if, in fact, they get infected. You really want to protect those vulnerable people. So the guideline, as stringent as it sounds, I know is appropriate because it has worked in other settings, is to essentially have these individuals, the elderly, self-isolate in the home for at least the next 15 days to see what the direction of this outbreak is. And that means physical separation. Now, you don't want to make someone so socially lonely that their life is miserable, but you want to physically separate yourself from them because a young person might go out into the community, get infected, and we know now from good experience with China, with South Korea, and now most recently with Italy and France, that younger individuals who get infected tend to do very well. Some of them have minimal symptoms as opposed to the chance of getting into trouble. So a young person may go out, get infected, and inadvertently come back, and by physical interaction with the elderly or those with compromised immune systems, might actually infect them. And then the consequences are much more severe than a younger person getting infected.
So, Dr. Fauci, I'm going to use myself as an example, and we'll expand from there. I'm 64. I'm in terrific shape. Just had my physical. Ran 7 miles on Kauai a week ago. In fact, the Spouting Horn. I know you run every day, 3.5 miles. I've got runner's back and a tear in a rotator cuff, but I'm in great shape. My grandkids are healthy. You would still tell me, don't go visit them.
No, I would tell you the following, that as a general guideline rule, you should not. But, when you talk about the elderly, particularly if, as you say, you are otherwise really quite healthy, there's a numerical age and there's a physiologic age. And some people who are 55, 60 are really kind of, compromised because they don't age well. Whereas some people 75 and even 80 who are vigorous, athletic, and they do well. So when you get a guideline and have a cutoff and you say, well, if you're 70 years of age or older, there really needs to be some flexibility in interpreting that. I mean, if you want to be totally safe, then you overshoot and say, okay, I'm 60 years old, I'm 65, but I'm very, very healthy, but I'm still going to self-isolate because even though I'm very healthy and I have no issues or problems, I'm not going to take a chance.
Well, let's
do that.
Let's expand it out, Doctor. We got seniors who live for golf and who live for tennis, and they've got regular golfing partners and they got regular tennis partners, and they want to go to their club and they say, oh, it's all very clean, and I'm only going to see the caddy, and I'm only going to see the bag boy, and I'm going to play 18 with my friend who's also very healthy. Do you want them to stay home?
Well, in general, yes, but
Perfect.
Again, with exceptions. For example, you don't want people to have crowds that are 10 or more. You don't want to say after you've been one-on-one with someone, you then go to the bar and have a few drinks with 50 people in the bar.
Yep.
Those are the kind of things you don't want to do. But if you want to bend on the side of caution, I would say even though it's relatively low risk to go out and mingle with a few people, for now, for the 15-day trial period, I think it's the better part of valor, if you are an elderly person, to just hunker down for a couple of weeks, see what the trend of the outbreak is.
Now, I'm going to just pause one more time for the 60-plus crowd, and especially the 70-plus crowd. Can they go to the market? Can they get their hair cut? Can they go to the pharmacy if they just go and come back?
Well, again, it is some flexibility, but for the most part, it depends on how that person feels. If that person is an otherwise healthy 60-year-old, yes, they can go out to the market. What I would do is do it at a time when the market is not crowded. Do it at a time when there are not a lot of people there. But the default rule would be to self-isolate yourself.
All right, bigger question now, Dr. Fauci. You are like a character in John Barry's The Great Influenza, like Dr. William Welch, or The Ghost Maps, Jon Snow and Henry Whitehead. Those are books about the 1918 to 1920 pandemic and the cholera outbreak in London in 1854. I love public health nonfiction history, even though I'm a lawyer. I love this stuff. Are you aware of being a character in a book that will guide future people about how to handle inevitably future pandemics?
You know, I really don't think about it that way. I'm so intensely involved in what we're doing with the task force here and trying to raise the awareness of the American people. I don't think of hardly anything else but the job I'm doing. I'm not thinking ahead about books and characters and things like that.
Well, the reason I want to ask you to do it is because the more we know about what this task force does, the more it will inform the next pandemic. Do you agree with me about that? That we learn from the behaviors of governments in the face of crises, what to do and not to do?
I totally agree with you. In fact, many of the lessons I've learned over the years with attacking the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the early 1980s, the anthrax attacks, the threat of the bird flu, the Ebola, the Zika, all of those things that I've had the experience, I would say the privilege of being able to participate and help in, those have all informed how I do things now.
Is that the president, Dr. Fauci? If it's the president, we'll yield.
Well, it isn't the president, but it's close.
Okay, well, I'm not going to yield then. If it's Mike Pence telling me we're talking to Hugh Hewitt, and Mike will, the vice president will understand. I want to get your advice. You're a good Catholic kid, Our Lady of Guadalupe, Regis High School, as am I. I want your specific advice to the church and other churches. Yeah, that my diocese in Arlington issued a dispensation to 60-year-olds don't go to Mass. What's your advice to priests over 60, to non-religious pastors of other denominations, kind-hearted people all over, whose natural inclination is to serve their flocks?
Yeah, I think that they should, again, the default, that they should do the guidelines the way we have for others. There are 65-year-olds and 70-year-olds like myself who have jobs that are important in the community and that are service, that you have to say, well, for the most part, people in this group should stay home. But some people have jobs that can't do that. So, I mean, I wouldn't make a strict rule for an older priest. I would tell the priest that make sure there's nothing that happens in the Mass, services, the Eucharist, the wine, the host. None of that should endanger people from an infectious disease standpoint. So there are certain things in the Mass a congregation I might call off if you have people coming together in a church. Even individually, it would have to be suspend certain aspects of the Mass. Certainly drinking of wine from the chalice, I would really be careful about.
Now, Doctor, I want to close with you. Senator Cotton's coming up pretty quick, but the big unanswered question, because I don't know that many members of the White House press corps have actually read The Great Influenza, is that between its appearance in Kansas in the spring of 1918 and its devastating second wave, it went through 12 iterations, according to John Barry's book, and the second and third and fourth, they got deadlier. The hardest question for me to answer is during the summer when the virus appears to disappear, will it be iterating into a more deadly virus? Is there any science to tell us if we're getting crowd immunity or if it's going to come back in a more virulent form?
We do not know. When we suppressed the SARS coronavirus, it went away and never came back. We are hoping that if we can suppress this by mitigation and by containment over the next few months, that when we get into the deep summer, that it will disappear. If it doesn't and come back, hopefully that will give us more breathing room to develop therapies as well as a vaccine. But the direct answer to your question is we do not know if it will come back and how it will come back. It's a possibility, but we just need to be prepared for it.
I was cheered yesterday by the record-setting initiation of a trial on a vaccine. I am curious if there is other good news on interventions for those who are suffering from virus pneumonia and related, there's some pretty awful related maladies. Are there any new interventions that have crossed your screen?
Oh, there are several that are in clinical trial. They have not yet been proven to be effective, but there are a number of interventions, what we call therapies, direct antiviral therapies, that are being tested in China and some that are even being tested here in the United States.
Now, my last technical question has to do with the CDC and the testing breakdown. Was that because of regulatory capture? Was that because the CDC always prefers its own work? Was that simply because I think what the president was saying yesterday is while we've confronted Ebola and H1N1, we've never confronted as fast a moving virus as this one before that is so elusive to diagnose. What happened on the testing development?
It was a complicated series of multiple things that conflated that just, went the wrong way. One of them was a technical glitch that slowed things down in the beginning. Nobody's fault. There wasn't any bad guys there. It just happened. And then when the CDC realized and the FDA, that both the system itself as it was set up, which serves certain circumstances very well, was not well suited to the kind of broad testing that we needed the private sector to get involved in. The regulatory constraints, which under certain circumstances are helpful and protective of the American people, were not suited to the emergence of this particular outbreak. So there was a confluence of a bunch of things. I believe now that the CDC and the FDA and the department, that we've got it right now because we're handing much of it over to the private sector, the heavy hitter companies that do this for a living. And I think what you're going to be seeing looking forward is a major, major improvement in the availability of testing.
Was the glitch or anything about the production of the test President Trump's fault? Or actually, let me put it more broadly, would every president have run into the same problem?
Oh, absolutely. This has nothing to do with anybody's fault, certainly not the president's fault.
And that brings me to my last question. What is it like working with the president? You've worked with a lot of presidents. And by the way, I got two questions. I lied. I have two more questions. What's it like to work with the president?
It's an interesting experience. Each president has their own unique character. He's somebody who is, very active, a lot of things going on, very direct, very decisive.
And so my last question is about Tony Fauci. You could have retired years ago and made bank. I mean, you could have gone on to every board of every publicly traded pharmaceutical. You've probably given up $100 million in lost opportunity costs, what economics would call that. Why?
Well, I'm a public servant. I mean, that's who I am. I am who I am, and I've been a public servant for decades and decades. I love it. I love the challenge. And to be quite honest, I mean, that money does not mean that much to me at all. I just need enough to get along and get up and go to work. And what I do, I get a great deal of gratification of. So, I mean, the idea about how many millions and millions and millions I would have, not had, it doesn't faze me. I don't even think about it.
And is that the Catholic in you? Is there a teacher back at Our Lady of Guadalupe? Is there a nun back there who taught Tony Fauci?
Well, there's a nun and there's a bunch of Jesuit priests, too.
Oh, they're Jesuits? Oh, my gosh. I'm not sure. You're making news there if it's the Jesuits. Very last question. The Pope took a walk, Dr. Fauci. What did you make? He's 83 years old. He's out walking around. There's surface infection, right? Is that what the Pope should be doing?
Well, the Pope is a very special person. He has things and responsibilities to his flock, if you want to call it that sometimes supersede things of self-protection.
So you're not, well, okay, Tony Fauci, I'm not going to ask you to criticize the Pope. I appreciate your spending time with me, Doctor. I think those are great guidelines, and I think you're getting compliance. I lied one more time because Tom Cotton's not here. There were thousands of college kids in the water in Florida yesterday. I'm sure you saw the picture. What's your message to them?
Yeah, I would tell them, please, even though you yourself feel invulnerable, being in crowds, getting infected, you may inadvertently bring the infection to a vulnerable person who might be your father, your grandfather, your sick uncle. Take care. We all have to be in this together. This is all of country pulling together to get through this.
Should they go home?
The kids, they should just get out of crowds. That's what they should do.
I will leave it at that. I'm going to pass it off to Senator Tom Cotton, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Thank you. You are wonderful.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Now, Senator Tom Cotton, I'm not going to say you're wonderful. You guys have work to do this week. Good morning, Senator.
We're going to be working busily all this week because we were working over the weekend, frankly, Hugh. We had to shut down my office and have my workers telecommute because of the virus hitting the halls of Congress, but we haven't been taking a break at all in this national crisis.
Let me ask you, what is going to happen to the House bill? And there is an expectation from Jake Sherman and David Drucker and others that the Senate will pass the House bill and then will immediately work on their own bill, which they will send to the House with the expectation that reciprocity in the attention to relief and stimulus bills will be mutual.
Well, I hope that doesn't happen, Hugh. It may, but I hope it doesn't because the House bill has some bad flaws in it that will actually make the situation in a lot of our workplaces worse. So the centerpiece of the House bill when it comes to helping affected workers is a new kind of tax credit through employers for sick leave. That doesn't go big enough. It doesn't go far enough. First off, there are a lot of people who are not sick who are affected and displaced by this virus. Maybe their businesses in furlough, like restaurants and bars and theaters, or maybe their child has been sent home because the school is closed. They're going to need some financial aid, just like someone who has the virus or someone who has been quarantined for exposure to the virus. Likewise, I have doubts that a new kind of tax credit that uses employers as a middleman will move quickly enough to get cash in the hands of those people who have to put food on the table this week and pay the bills this month. So there's at least a couple different ways I think we can move faster. We could use the existing unemployment insurance system that we have in all 50 states that is designed to get checks out fast to people in need. We could use the tax rebate, tax refund system for all taxpayers last year, probably capping it at a level where we're confident that people above that level can weather the storm and get checks out in that way. So the House bill can be improved. Plenty of good stuff in there, but it can be improved. We should take a pause. We should play the role that our founders intended for the Senate, be the sober second thought to a quick-acting House, and make this bill better for the American people.
I think you're going to be overruled in that, Senator Cotton, by 60 senators. So assuming that I'm correct, if there is a second Senate bill, will it go farther and faster than the House bill did, which I believe, by the way, is not up to the crisis that we face. The House bill will not do what they hope it will do. And if it passes, will there be another bill?
So I believe that if the House bill passes as is, Hugh, which again, it should not, that the Senate will begin acting quickly on another bill that does go farther, and then does look at some longer-term impacts beyond just helping people affected this week and next week. Because we have to remember, this is a fast-acting crisis, and the way the world looked last week is very different from the way it's going to look next week. So if the Senate just passes the House bill, I'm confident we'll begin working on a third bill that will go farther and hopefully be better than what the House passed.
Now, Senator Cotton, is the goal to make whole the people? I have personal experience in this. I run the Nixon Library. I've had to send people home, but they haven't lost money. They haven't been injured. The library's been injured, the not-for-profit. Is the goal, in your mind, to make everybody whole who has been injured economically by virtue of what the Great American Shutdown is?
Hugh, the goal is to help people get through this crisis. So if you're home because you're sick or you've been exposed to the virus or your business is furloughed, we want to make sure that you have enough money to put food on the table for yourself and your kids, keep the roof over your head, and pay your bills. If you're the kind of white-collar, salaried worker that can telecommute and whose business is still generating revenues, you have less need for that kind of subsistence support. But we want to make sure that everyone goes home that should be home and has no financial incentive to go back to their workplace or go out and try to find more work to make ends meet this week.
Exactly. And Jeff Bezos and Hugh Hewitt and a whole millions of Americans need no help at all. But the cab driver who drove me from National to my home when I came back on Sunday had one lift that day. How are you going to help him?
Yeah, that's right, Hugh, and that's another reason why I don't think the House bill that's structured goes far enough and fast enough. Again, it just focuses on people who are employed and who take sick leave. What about all those self-employed individuals, all those contractors, all those people who have seen a rapid decline in their income as well? That's why I think a better approach is simply to get cash payments or cash equivalents directly into the hands of anyone who's been affected by this crisis through existing infrastructure and programs like unemployment or like the tax rebate system.
Okay, I have a slightly different take. I think a put-up-your-hand system that trusts people to say, I lost X dollars, pay me, like the 9/11 fund would work. But let me ask you about the bigger issue of stimulus. Getting the car started again. Needs gas and it needs oil. If it's been left idle for a couple of weeks, you got to make sure it's filled and it's ready to go. Part of that is, I believe, charging the battery, and part of that is general stimulus, which I believe should come through defense spending. I mean, we have a top line need in the Navy. I'm sure you know what it is. I'm sure you know all that. Is there any thought to using this opportunity to stimulate the economy by virtue of doing what we need to do anyway, which is refill our readiness needs and build the forces that we need?
So, Hugh, I've heard you make that case on the radio this week, and I think it's very much worth considering. Obviously, it won't have a generalized impact across the country, but our defense industry is pretty dispersed across the country.
Yep.
Some companies that are major defense contractors are being significantly affected by the crisis. For instance, Boeing has seen a significant decline in orders of its wide-body aircraft. Boeing is also a major defense contractor. You have a lot of areas in the country, likewise, that have small and mid-sized defense contractors as well. So your point is well taken, that while a general stimulus measure, like, say, postponing the tax filing date for a few months from April 15th, or letting individuals file extensions, would influence all regions and all industries of the country, but we might want to look at some specific sectors like the defense industry, where the taxpayer will have something concrete to show for those investments on the back end of this crisis.
Excellent. Now, last question, Senator Cotton. No false humility here. I was the first guy talking about this in January because I'd read The Great Influenza, and you were the first elected official who took it seriously. In my humble opinion, you were first. We knew that the People's Republic of China would not be forthcoming because we know the regime. Now they are attempting, through a focused propaganda campaign, to change the narrative and to rewrite history, which communists always do. What is your response to General Secretary Xi and all of his minions who are actually actively engaged in information warfare on a generalized basis?
Well, first, this is one of those things that you wish you would not have been correct about. But I could tell in mid-January, before this virus was even reported in the Western media, just from reports from East Asia, that it was serious. I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an epidemiologist. But you could tell from the way the Chinese Communist Party was lying at the time and the extreme measures they were taking how serious it would be. You can tell that now as well because they are actively trying to claim that this virus did not originate in China. That's one reason why I call it the Wuhan coronavirus or the China virus, because when the Chinese Communist Party is engaged in active disinformation operations with its own people and around the world, we have to stand up and be crystal clear that they are responsible for unleashing a plague on the world, and they will face consequences on the back end of this. China needs the United States and our market and our economy a lot more than we need China. And all of those jobs and all of those factories that went to China over the last 30 years, I will predict are not going to be there much longer.
Now, what is the obligation of the American media in the face of active disinformation campaigns from a peer competitor to report what they are doing? There was some shaming of people who used Wuhan flu or China virus. That failed quickly. It was coming from the left. It was a political attack on the president and the center right. But it's vanished because I think they are aware. But what is the responsibility of the media to keep this part of the story in front of the American people?
Yeah, well, Hugh, the rich irony is, and I'm sure you've seen the collections online or the clips on cable news, that almost every mainstream media outlet in January and February, like CNN and MSNBC and the Washington Post and the New York Times, was in fact referring to this virus as the Wuhan coronavirus or the China virus or what have you. Then they decided they wanted to use it as a cudgel against their political adversaries. They were being politically correct fools. At this point, now that China is engaged in active disinformation operations, it's incumbent upon our media in America to explain to Americans what our adversaries in the Chinese Communist Party are trying to do.
Last question is about President Trump. He gave himself a 10 out of 10 yesterday. Dr. Fauci just explained that the testing fiasco had nothing to do with him, nothing, and that every president would have had the same problem. How do you rate the president's handling and what is going on in the media's questioning of him? It's almost it's almost evidence every day of TDS.
I'll leave grades to the media and, more importantly, to the voters when they cast their ballots across the country. I'm focused on trying to get us through this crisis. I can tell you that President Trump in January, after I'd spoken to him on several occasions about shutting down travel from mainland China, made the bold and decisive choice to do so against the advice of many of the so-called experts in his administration. That is not what they call part of the public health playbook. Suggest we should rewrite that playbook, but that was a bold decision that the president was being counseled not to do. I think everyone recognizes now it was the right decision, and it has significantly slowed the spread of the virus in this country.
We have 4,600 cases. I know you've been tweeting, be prepared to act, as Alameda County did yesterday, and issue shelter-in-place orders, stay at home, and enforce it with public health authorities. That surprised a lot of people, Senator Cotton. So I just want to give the last minute to you. Why are you taking such an approach that surprises conservative, freedom-loving Tom Cotton is saying, get ready, you may be told to stay home and you're going to listen?
Because I want everyone to look at what has happened in Italy. 2 weeks ago, Italians were enjoying early spring weather and they were sipping coffee and wine at restaurants and bars. Today, elderly Italians are being denied care at hospitals and administered last rites because their healthcare system is totally overloaded. I know that kind of national shutdown or quarantine or curfew, whatever you want to call it, will impose hardship. We can take steps to mitigate those hardships. We can help the economy get back on your feet, but we can't get your life back. We can't get your parents' and your grandparents' life back. We need to act aggressively now to save lives tomorrow.
Senator Tom Cotton, thank you.
Thank you, Hugh.
Oh, no. Lights went out. There, they moved. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi. Quite a day. Dr. Fauci, Tom Cotton, and now I'm joined by Michael Shear of the New York Times, White House correspondent. Hello, Michael. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good.
Is everybody in your family fine?
We are all fine. We're all hunkered down here at home, and just like everybody else, trying to stay healthy.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Let me begin by getting your reaction to Dr. Fauci. You just did a long interview with me. The audio and transcript will be posted shortly. I hesitate to point to one thing. He made a lot of news and gave out a lot of information in a 20-minute interview, but he was adamant, very clear, that the CDC testing delay was nobody's fault and certainly not the fault of Donald Trump. Do you believe that is widely reported, and or does the media demonstrate reluctance in making that point?
Well, I think there probably is some reluctance to come to that conclusion, and I think that reluctance is legitimate because I don't think we fully know the story. I can tell you that, at the New York Times, we've reported a lot of we've written a lot of stories about the testing, and we've looked at pieces of it. But I don't think that we know the full story. So I don't know that you could say definitively this is all Donald Trump's fault. But I also don't think that you could draw a definitive conclusion yet that says that we know everything we need to know about where the failures on testing were and who was responsible for them. So I agree.
We need to hone in on that question because it is the key failure. The key success was closing China travel, but the key failure was the testing. But when Tony Fauci tells me this had nothing to do with the president, it's a built-in CDC problem, does that make an impact on you?
Sure. I mean, look, I think that is. So first of all, I think there's two things. One, there's the question of direct responsibility. Were there decisions made? Were there specific actions taken at the president's direction? I don't think we know that yet. And it's possible if Tony Fauci is saying that he was not involved at all in that, then that's something to consider. I also think, though, that the question of ultimate responsibility, the sort of the buck stops here question, which was asked of the president at a news conference the other day, I think that's a different thing, and I think people can judge for themselves whether they hold the president responsible, in a more macro sense, in a broader sense of, do people think it's the president's responsibility to make sure the government is operating, all the way down to the bowels of the bureaucracy, and I think that's a separate question, I think, than what you're asking, but I think also one that, people are going to make a judgment on.
It's an important question. I just want one standard used because I have seen, and not you, Michael, I'm not putting you in here. I have seen a lot of members of the media assign him responsibility for this, and I look back on my own executive branch experience and say the last thing a president of the United States would do is contradict guidance from the CDC on how to develop a test for an emerging pandemic. You just would not do that. I've had a very experienced former Hill staffer and also former state legislator write, quote, "If we ever get an honest look at why the CDC wouldn't take the WHO COVID-19 test, we'll find regulatory capture. Some pharma-type company had convinced them to use their test instead, and then they couldn't deliver." I don't know if that's true or not, end of quote. I don't know if that's true or not, but I do believe we will find out when the history is written. Donald Trump had nothing to do with the testing delay. I think we're going to find that out, Michael, but I think the media generally is reluctant to exonerate him from anything that he could possibly be exonerated from because the TDS is so widespread.
Yeah, look, I think that one of the things that we're seeing in the midst of this very, very serious crisis is that we tend to devolve in Washington to a political discussion, right? And that's on both sides, and I think it involves the media too. That's what we do mostly, and I think we're having a little bit of a difficult time shifting out of a purely political back and forth and finger pointing, and to a place where we're talking mostly about a substantive question, which is this virus and how to deal with it. I will say I think there has been some really strong reporting in our paper, in the Washington Post, in the Wall Street Journal, and elsewhere about the really trying to delve into the bureaucratic decisions that were made that have nothing to do, as you say, directly with the president. Because I think we need to figure that out if we're going to get if the country is going to get this right. I think the public needs information about what really happened.
Absolutely. In fact, I asked Dr. Fauci if he was taking notes, and he said he wasn't. And I said to him, that's not a good thing. We need to know everything that happened so that the next pandemic, we are looking back now at the Great Influenza by John Barry, or the ghost map that was written about the 1854 cholera epidemic, and we learn from past public health experiences how to move forward. We need a detailed accounting of everything that went right and wrong. But I just believe the media is so locked into that political narrative, red-blue narrative, that I don't know that it can break out of it, Michael. I despair, actually, of America getting a full picture because they're either going to watch red media or blue media.
Right. Well, and I think that is one of the downsides of the direction in the media generally that we've gone over the last decade or so, which has sort of polarized the media, in a way that you have lots of talking heads on both sides that are only talking to each other, to their own side. But look, I do think the one other point I would make is that while I agree with you that there are probably lots of decisions that were made that the president had nothing to do with, or that any president would have anything to do with, I do think that there is bureaucracies take their cues from the president and from the direction from the president. And I do think you have to. I do think you have to think about, and look at and examine whether the bureaucracies moved or didn't move, in part because they were taking their cues from the president. And I'm not making a judgment necessarily, because I think there's a lot more that needs to be learned. But I do think that's part of the examination that we have to do.
Michael, I'm speaking as the former Senate-confirmed deputy director and acting director of the Office of Personnel Management, which only has 6,000 people. I don't know how many people CDC has. The president has almost no ability to move a bureaucracy until and unless a crisis arrives. And the coronavirus became a crisis 2 weeks ago. Even though I was reporting on it in January and saying it's going to be a crisis, it became a crisis 2 weeks ago. And so you cannot move the bureaucratic state absent that crisis moment. That's why the famous Rahm Emanuel, never let a crisis go to waste, is actually always misappropriated. What he's saying is you can actually make change when a crisis arises, but otherwise you just can't do it. There are only 3,000 political appointees and 2 million federal employees.
Right. Well, I mean, we'll see. I think that's. I take your point, and I think that to your earlier plea for examination and understanding about what happened, I think we need to do more, do more deep reporting, and I know we're doing that. Even as I speak, we're doing a lot of that reporting this week, and I hope that all news organizations will continue to do that, and that the government itself will continue to examine what went wrong. I don't think this idea that you can't look back now.
Absolutely not. Yeah, we have to. We have to. That's how you learn. Now I got a question. It's a practical one. Were you in the White House yesterday for the briefing?
I was not. I mean, we have done at the Times. We've taken very seriously the guidance that we should stay home if we can. And the guidance at the White House and from the White House Correspondents Association is to minimize our presence there. We did have a reporter there because it was our turn to be what they call the in-town pool, which is the sort of single reporter that sort of gathering up information during the day for the rest of the press corps. So the Times had a reporter there, but I, whereas normally a bunch of us might go over there, we stayed at home.
Smart. Now, so my double question is, can we clone Steve Holland? And number two, who was the guy with the glove who asked if the Bucks die? I mean, I've never seen that guy before. Who was that guy?
I don't know. There's a lot. I have no idea, and probably Twitter can tell us who that was.
Morrow was looking like
ask that question.
Morrow was looking like, who's this guy? And I just
I was watching, and I saw the same look on her face. That's true.
Michael Shear, good to talk to you. Follow him on Twitter, Shear M, SHEARM, because you should. You also should go to andrewandtodd.com, andrewandtodd.com. If you're going to buy a house right now, they're the people to do it for you. They're with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. And crucially, if you're going to refinance, they're still leaning into refinances, even with these rates so low. 10, 15, 20-year refinances, amazing rates. Go to andrewandtodd.com. There was Sierra Pacific Mortgage. Fill out a few questions online. They'll be right back to you, andrewandtodd.com. A lot of mortgage companies said, we're out, we're done. They're pushing back on new home applications, not andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172, 888-888-1172. If you want to buy a house because you know right now is the time with these rates, especially a 10, 15, or 20-year mortgage, 888-888-1172. Come right back. I'll play you the rest of my Anthony Fauci interview. How's that?
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
That's really not St. Patrick's Day music, but it's by the Irish Rovers. Happy St. Patrick's Day, America. It's day 2 of the Great American Slowdown, Shutdown, Pause, whatever you want to call it. I call it an opportunity to talk this morning with Dr. Anthony Fauci. I didn't get to air all of it. Here is the part of the interview I did not already air.
I believe now that the CDC and the FDA and the department, that we've got it right now because we're handing much of it over to the private sector, the heavy hitter companies that do this for a living. And I think what you're going to be seeing looking forward is a major, major improvement in the availability of testing.
Was the glitch or anything about the production of the test President Trump's fault? Or actually, let me put it more broadly, would every president have run into the same problem?
Oh, absolutely. This has nothing to do with anybody's fault, certainly not the president's fault.
And that brings me to my last question. What is it like working with the president? You've worked with a lot of presidents. And by the way, I got 2 questions. I lied. I have 2 more questions. What's it like to work with the president?
It's an interesting experience. You know, each president has their own unique character. He's somebody who is, you know, very active, a lot of things going on, very direct, very decisive.
And so my last question is about Tony Fauci. You could have retired years ago and made bank. I mean, you could have gone on to every board of every publicly traded pharmaceutical. You've probably given up $100 million in lost opportunity costs, what economics would call that. Why?
Well, I'm a public servant. I mean, that's who I am. I am who I am, and I've been a public servant for decades and decades. I love it. I love the challenge. And to be quite honest, I mean, that money does not mean that much to me at all. I just need enough to get along and get up and go to work. And what I do, I get a great deal of gratification of. So, I mean, the idea about how many millions and millions and millions I would have, you know, not had, it doesn't faze me. I don't even think about it.
And is that the Catholic in you? Is there a teacher back at Our Lady of Guadalupe? Is there a nun back there who taught Tony Fauci?
Well, there's a nun and there's a bunch of Jesuit priests, too.
Oh, they're Jesuits? Oh, my gosh. I'm not sure. You're making news there if it's the Jesuits. Very last question. The Pope took a walk, Dr.
Right.
Fauci. What did you make? He's 83 years old. He's out walking around. There's surface infection, right? Is that what the Pope should be doing?
Well, you know, the Pope is a very special person. He has things and responsibilities to his flock, if you want to call it that sometimes supersede things of self-protection.
So you're not, well, okay, Tony Fauci, I'm not going to ask you to criticize the Pope. I appreciate your spending time with me, Doctor. I think those are great guidelines, and I think you're getting compliance. I lied one more time because Tom Cotton's not here. There were thousands of college kids in the water in Florida yesterday. I'm sure you saw the picture. What's your message to them?
Yeah, I would tell them, please, even though you yourself feel invulnerable, being in crowds, getting infected, you may inadvertently bring the infection to a vulnerable person who might be your father, your grandfather, your sick uncle. Take care. We all have to be in this together. This is all of country pulling together to get through this.
Should they go home?
The kids, yeah, they should just get out of crowds. That's what they should do.
I will leave it at that. I'm going to pass it off to Senator Tom Cotton. Dr. Anthony Fauci, thank you. You are wonderful.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
He is wonderful, isn't he? The audio transcript of that will be posted shortly. Amanda Carpenter, who you may or may not see on CNN, is dogging me because I said the key takeaway from that is that he exonerated Trump of any responsibility. That's not it. Boy, oh boy, TDS is strong in that one. I will tell you, however, I want everyone to also consider food for the poor. You know, it was begun by Catholic priests. It's now non-denominational. But like Tony Fauci, they exist to serve, and they serve the starving across the Americas. And they're doing it particularly in Guatemala right now, and they need your help. Call 855-359-4673, especially, America's a rich country. The poor countries that are battling this, oh my gosh, they need your help. At the top of HughHewitt.com, there's a Feed Starving Families banner. Please go there, $320, just $27 a month. We'll bless a family of 4 with food for a year and water for life. Feed Starving Families banner at the top of HughHewitt.com. Come right back. We continue. The Irish Rover. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt on St. Patrick's Day. Old friend David French joining me now from the Dispatch, senior editor. Good morning, David. How are you?
I'm good. Hugh, how are you doing?
Good. Are you partial to Irish music at all?
I mean, I don't dislike it, but I don't listen to that much of it.
Okay. Are you on speaker because it's distorted?
No.
Okay, doggone it. Just try and stay still. David, okay. I loved your Sunday Dispatch on Nana. Would you tell people, I think it probably changed more behaviors by people who read it towards their parents and towards their social distancing than any other thing I've read. Would you summarize it for people?
Yeah, well, thank you. What I did is I went back and I just talked about my own grandmother, the person who changed my life more than anybody else outside of my own parents, taught me my love of history, my love of learning, my love of reading. And I just traced her influence in my life from when I was a small kid touring the battlefields of the South with her growing up, to reading beside her when I was a teenager, to she was the first person I called when I got into law school. And she died days before I could tell her that I had named, or my wife and I had named our firstborn daughter after her. And I just wanted to remind people of the incredible, incalculable value of every single day that we have with our parents, with our grandparents, because I'd seen, online in some quarters, people minimizing, well, this is, the coronavirus is something that hits, the very old or the immunocompromised, and people were being careless, and I'd seen sort of large-scale carelessness. Even, I don't know if you saw this, Hugh, but downtown Nashville was trending on Twitter because people were taking pictures of huge, packed gatherings of people, really not far from where we'd had a coronavirus outbreak in the county. And so I wanted to remind people not just of the affection and love that they have for folks who are in their senior years, but also of really the sacred duty we have as a Christian. The fifth commandment, honor your father and mother, and reference the Westminster Larger Catechism and how it talks that Scripture extends that duty of honor and that duty of care even to protect the person of not just your father and mother, but of people who are advanced in age and senior to you in years. And so I wanted to just get it out there.
Well, it was very well done. It influenced an interview I did this morning with Dr. Fauci. And I began it by saying, I've got a daughter and I've got 3 grandkids. They're all under 9.
Right.
And her husband's deployed. So I was going to go visit her and help her. Because, like every other parent who doesn't homeschool, she's going crazy, learning how to do it. And she told me, you can't come. Yeah, you're 64, you can't come. I don't know if the kid. I asked Dr. Fauci if that's case, and said she's right, which I hate because she's from Rumpel, she who must be obeyed. And until you have an adult daughter, you will not understand what that's like. But that's hard, right?
Yeah,
that's hard for people to do. But Dr. Fauci said, do it.
Yes, well, and I referenced in the piece a Ben Shapiro tweet that I thought was really poignant about how, in a normal crisis, our instinct is to kind of cluster together, to be together. And then now what we're being encouraged to do is isolate. But that doesn't mean you can't reach out. That doesn't mean you can't check in daily. You can't check in and make sure that those senior citizens in your life, those people who are significantly more vulnerable than you, that they're not being taken care of, and that you can make sure that they have the supplies that they need. You can make sure that they don't feel abandoned and alone. And I think that's one thing, Hugh, that is going to be so tough, especially in those places where the lockdown has become all the more real, like in San Francisco in recent days, communicating to people that they are not alone. And we have an instinct to kind of cluster together in the physical proximity. I think we can cluster together maybe some in the virtual world as well by keeping people close and in close contact.
Now, David, I think you have a unique role to play, and I want to just talk about it with you. My unique role is to be able to speak to Trump-supporting people about the need to criticize the president when he should be criticized during the virus, during a national emergency, not just to protect him. But I just got the strangest tweet at from Amanda Carpenter, is never Trump at the Bulwark, which they all are, saying she wasn't going to listen to the Anthony Fauci interview because it didn't appear on a network that she trusts, meaning Salem. I think Trump derangement syndrome is destroying the coverage of the media because people won't speak responsibly to the people with whom they have credibility. Do you agree with me on the premise?
I think here's what I would say. I think that there is still, even days and weeks into this, too many people looking at this primarily through a political prism, rather than through a prism of essentially this is a time of solidarity, and unity. And I'll give you a good example, Hugh. So there have been a lot of people who've looked at the actions of Governor DeWine, looked at actions of Governor Newsom, different governors all around the country, and it's that they're acting because Trump has failed to act. And that's not accurate. Under our system of government, it is the governors, and I have a big piece about this at the Dispatch today. It is the governors who have the police power to act. It is, in fact, going back to the nation's founding. I quote Gibbon v. Ogden, an 1824 case in the Supreme Court.
Yes.
That says that that states have the power of quarantine and they have the power to deal with public health laws of every kind. This is the nature of our federal system, is the states have the police power while the federal government is limited to the enumerated powers. And so a lot of people don't understand the federal system, for example, and there's such a built-in idea that the federal government is the only relevant government here, that when they see the states act, they think automatically that it's evidence that the Trump administration has failed to act in some important way. But these are the states acting according to the legal authority that they have, and that the legal authority they've always had. So it is very hard in a crisis like this to disengage yourself from the daily who's up, who's down political combat that we've had, and try to just plow through to the truth. And that's where Dr. Fauci, I think, has been absolutely an indispensable voice. I mean,
he is 90. I mean, he's what is he? 93, 89, 79 years old. 79. Yeah, and I asked him. You should read it, because I asked him about his service ethic and where it comes from, because he could have made millions and hundreds of millions of dollars if he quit at 65 and got on boards, and he just doesn't do that. But right. Here's the key. Part of the story is, and it's important for the future, is why did the CDC reject the WHO test? I don't blame Trump for that. And I asked him, is Trump responsible? He said, absolutely not. No one's responsible. CDC is doing what they thought was best. And that's what Amanda was reacting. She doesn't want to hear that. And I think people on my side have to speak to my constituency. And David, you're known as a Trump critic. You have to talk to the people who are Trump critics and tell them they've got to lay that down. Anthony Fauci is good whether he's on my show or CNN. He's good whether he's on NBC, MSNBC, or Fox. He's Anthony Fauci.
Well, right. That's exactly right. I mean, he is a voice that I want to hear from. And here's another thing I think about, like the testing, the various other early actions in the course of responding to this virus. Look, we're in a fog of war type situation here. There is no definitive history that has yet been written about all of this. This is an emerging situation where it is very, very difficult under the best of circumstances to respond to this. And I think that the counting of, holding people accountable and figuring out the precise contours of what went wrong 2, 3, 4 weeks ago is very, very difficult right now. That time will come. There will be a time when this becomes history, and we're going to be able to do the kind of after-action report that is very necessary to determine how we can do better in the days and weeks coming forward. So I'm in a position I'm very much open to and wanting to read accounts of the very recent past and the days and weeks of the days and weeks that have just passed by. But I'm taking all of it with a grain of salt. I mean, I served in Iraq. I know when situations we're in the middle of an emerging crisis, that often first reports are either inaccurate or incomplete, and you take them with a grain of salt. So almost all of these TikToks of responses and what happened in the recent days. I'm listening to them, I'm reading them, I'm taking them in, but I'm also taking all of them with a grain of salt. And I'm much more concerned with the what is the public health response now than who failed 5 days ago.
That is a generosity of spirit on the part of journalists, which is lacking right now. And I think they need to understand. And I asked Dr. Fauci to please keep notes because we need the account for the next pandemic. Like we have the Great Influenza by John Barry and the ghost map from 1854 in London. We need to study every episode for failings and positives. But that generosity of spirit towards everyone, I think Nancy Pelosi is doing a good job. I'm here to tell you, I think they're doing a good job. They're going to have some disagreements, but she's keeping it out of the front pages. But I just hope someone infuses generosity of spirit towards Trump among the people who hate him. I think it's the critical deficit in media right now. David, last word to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the tone that he took yesterday was the exact right tone. I've had problems with some of the statements he's made before yesterday, but I think the tone he took yesterday was the exact right tone. And look, the bottom line is there are a lot of people in this country who are not going to take it very seriously with the seriousness it needs until they see Trump taking it with the seriousness it needs. And when they see that happen, I think we've got a real chance. And I think the last thing that it's important is to look out there and see that our destiny does not have to be Italy. That there is still a chance to get this to flatten that curve, as I know you've talked about and as everyone has talked about online. And to do that, though, we have to trust each other. And it's one of the challenges of
we lost him.
Trust. It's a response that causes high trust in a low trust time. And we've got to get over that.
High trust in a low trust time. Well put. Keep writing. The Dispatch, David A. French on Sunday especially. I just love your Sunday letters, David French. Thank you. Follow him on Twitter at David A. French. Thank you, my friend. Let me tell you as well, one of the things you need in this time of low trust is high trust in products. I have very high trust in ReliefFactor.com. I know Pete and Seth Talbot who put it together. I have very high trust in HonorBoundCoffee.com, which they also put together. 100% of the profits from Honor Bound Coffee go to serve military families. ReliefFactor.com, though, goes to serve you. $19.95. I carry curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. The only 4 natural supplements I take. The only 4. And everyone should be taking them. I believe that. I believe it will make your life better. I think it makes some people feel instantly better because they haven't taken anything ever because they don't trust over-the-counters and they don't want to get hooked on prescription meds and they just generally are suspicious. ReliefFactor.com, natural supplements that do support the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains that accompany aging and exercise. You're definitely getting older. It isn't going to cure the coronavirus. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with making it easier to exercise and get older. And commute. Some of you have really easy commutes right now and you're regretting because all the people you work with aren't going to work. Well, those of you who are working at home, remember, if you're doing something new, you're going to have new aches and pains, ReliefFactor.com. Coming back, last segment of today's Hugh Hewitt Show with Alfredo Ortiz, Job Creators Network. What's going on out there among the job creators? Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Job Creators Network.
Welcome back, America. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Everything will be fine in America. We're going to be great, but small businesses are going to need help. Now, Job Creator Network, longtime sponsor of the program. I wanted Alfredo Ortiz, their president, to come on today because the Senate and the House are moving bills that will greatly impact small businesses and their impact from the virus. Alfredo, welcome. Where do people find out what you believe ought to be done, and how do they help you get it done?
Thank you very much, Hugh. JobCreatorsNetwork.com, JobCreatorsNetwork.com. That's where to go. Small business is too big to fail, Hugh. That's the message that we're getting out there. And I have to tell you, Congress and the administration, they are listening to that message. We're excited about that. Last time around, I think small businesses were out there, but never really were represented this way. And if you see the news the news alone, small businesses out there, people understand that it's the backbone of our economy, and so we're excited about it. We have three things here that we're pushing for: is expedited small business loans. We know that the SBA is one channel, but we think we can use our banks, our banking system across the board to expedite this, because cash is king, Hugh. You know this, in terms of small businesses, cash is king. So every single day that passes is a critical day for these small businesses. So we got to expedite cash.
How would you use banks, Alfredo?
Well, so I think what we do is, I'm not sure if you've ever gone through a small business application process. I have, as a small business owner myself. It takes about 3 to 5 months. So we need to expedite that application process so that folks can have, maybe on a one-page application, they walk into their bank to, whether it's a Chase or a community bank or a Citibank, Wells Fargo, they fill out that one-page application, it gets expedited processing, and 72 hours later, small business owners have cash in their bank.
Terrific. What's number 2?
Federally funded unemployment benefits. We continue to believe that that's a great way of doing it. A lot of franchisees of small business owners, and we got to remember that, they're saying that they're going to have a tough time with what's currently being considered in the bill. We're thinking, why not have both versions? Why not allow employers, for example, to choose whether they go down the Paid Family Leave Act and what's happening right now in the Senate, or maybe there's a different option which maybe uses block grants to the states and really leverages the unemployment insurance benefits that could be used from that perspective.
And the third step?
Well, the big one here is, we think, is a payroll tax holiday, and this is for all employers and employees of those companies that have 100 employees or less. This is probably what I would consider the most vulnerable area of our economy, the most frail, is that particular segment. And we think that, based on our estimates, too, that would cover about 92% of small businesses if we were to do that. And that's something that's immediate. One other idea that we threw out there was a possible 90-day to a 180-day deferral of cash payments to the federal government. So, for example, many small businesses are filing their quarterly taxes right now. The idea is, go ahead and still do the filings, but if you have cash due, go ahead and defer that for 90 to 180 days.
That's a superb idea.
Well, we think it's something that's quick, because guess what? All of these businesses have already reserved that cash to make those payments. So this would be an immediate infusion into their businesses if they don't have to make those payments. They still have to do the filing view, but they don't have to make payments.
They'll also get the opportunity then, I'm speaking as a small business owner and the director of the Nixon Library, they'll get the opportunity to revise their quarterlies. And you have to be within a target to avoid a penalty with the IRS. You've got to, honestly estimate your income and pay your quarterlies. And I've been doing it for 30 years, but I have no idea what the quarterlies are going to be, right?
Yeah, that's right. So this gives kind of everybody a time to catch up, to also focus on their businesses. We know that businesses are going to end up closing, Hugh. There's no way about it. I mean, we're seeing it already right now, and layoffs are going to be there. But we also then need to find alternate ways of kind of maintaining demand. Because the thing is, Hugh, we also want to start talking about the other end of this, right? Because we all know that we're going to get through this, right? As Americans, we always do. We always persevere, which is what makes America great. But we have to be able to start talking about also the future. We want to start having conversations about the Main Street Recovery Act, right? Because we are going to have to figure out how we're going to have to bring these small businesses back online that ended up shuttering their businesses or closing their doors, and unfortunately having to lay off employees. We need to think about what that's going to look like also, not just right now, because we want to be forward-thinking as well. And so that's some of the stuff we're also thinking. And that's why we need your listeners to please send us their ideas at jobcreatorsnetwork.com, because we are listening to all ideas, and I will tell you that directly, the administration is listening directly to us. I've had direct conversations with Secretary Mnuchin, and I have to tell you, for as busy as a guy as he is, he has taken a significant amount of time to just listen to the ideas that are coming from the small business community, and we could not be more appreciative of that.
You know, I love the fact that both Secretary Mnuchin and John Thune said, send us ideas. They recognize that they do not understand the scope of the problem, and they are open for business, as is Job Creators Network. They're open for ideas, as is Job Creators Network. Go to jobcreatorsnetwork.com. Alfredo, thank you. Press on, my friend. Press on. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. Dr. Fauci and Senator Tom Cotton, are they up yet? Dr. Fauci's interview is available. Amanda Carpenter and everybody else out there. If you want really good information, go read and listen to the Anthony Fauci interview at HughHewitt.com. I'll be back tomorrow in the Great American Shutdown. You can trust me, as you always have. Stay tuned, America.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.